This one will make you think the recent UK elections resulted as a major political shift, with the Conservative Party losing power as a result of widespread voter dissatisfaction. Key issues such as economic instability and leadership failures contributed to the change, paving the way for the left taking over and a potential realignment of the country's political landscape. Jordan Peterson had Nigel Farage on his show, and they discussed what the left is in stock for the UK for the next 4 years, exploring a wide range of topics from what a Starmer premiership might look like to what the woke left's overall agenda is. But before I delve deeper into it, make sure to subscribe for more discussions just like this.
If the Conservatives have been overrun by globalist liberals with a progressive agenda, I can't imagine who's lurking in the background on the Labour side. Well, I can imagine because I worked in universities, so I actually know exactly who's lurking in the background. And so I'm very apprehensive about what a Labour government will do to the UK. And so what do you think a Labour government will do to the UK?
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer has no leadership qualities whatsoever. He is devoid of any sort of charisma at all. And people do need a leader, that inspires them to a certain degree. He's kind of doing well because he's not the Conservatives, and there is revulsion. There is revulsion at them, a sense of betrayal about them. On the face of it, his manifesto on climate change is almost identical to the Conservatives. His manifesto on economics is almost identical to the Conservatives. But I think we know that what we'll see is trans ideology in the ascendancy. We'll see more legislation designed to divide us up into different groups rather than bring us together as human beings equal before the law. I look at his potential front bench of the top ministers. I see very little competence whatsoever. He's almost going to win by default, as opposed to, a big enthusiastic wave of support. And so in some ways, I think there's every opportunity for this just to be a one-term Labour government. There'll be no honeymoon. There'll be no sort of after-victory glow. He faces a big set of problems, the ones I mentioned earlier, the population explosion, the fact our public services don't work, the fact young people can't get a house and even their rents take up over half of their income. And he won't have the solutions to any of it. He's campaigning on a slogan of change, but actually it'll be more of the same, just ever so slightly worse. So here's the opportunity.
Nigel's correct here. Starmer, who became the UK Prime Minister after a landslide victory that gave the Labour Party a supermajority, is nothing short of a political opportunist. You see, the man's success is largely built on his ability to parrot what the public wants to hear, rather than presenting clear substantive plans to achieve his goals. Throughout his political career, Starmer has been demonstrated to a knack of tapping into popular sentiment. During his previous campaigns and subsequent tenures as MP, he frequently emphasized issues that resonated with the electorate, such as the National Health Service, social justice, and post-pandemic economic recovery. However, his rhetoric lacks the depth and specificity needed to translate these broad aspirations into actionable policy. For example, while Starmer has been vocal about his support for the NHS and the need for better funding and resource, he has not provided detailed plans on how to achieve these improvements and instead focus on general ideas. Similarly, his promises to address social inequalities and support economic recovery are vague and lacking in concrete proposals. This pattern shows that he's more focused on maintaining his popularity than devising and implementing effective policies. Additionally, his political maneuvering has sometimes appeared contradictory. Flip-flopping is the name of the game for Starmer, and he has done it numerous times in the past on key issues such as tax policies. For example, when he was fighting for the Labour leadership in 2020, he pledged to, quote, increase income tax for the top 5% of earners in order to take away votes from Jeremy Corbyn. But in 2023, he changed his tone and maintained it for this election, saying, quote, I don't want to raise income tax for top earners.
The opportunity is to reshape the centre-right of British politics, to be where the silent majority actually are. Now, I know that the British Conservative Party have been around for 190 years, but nothing necessarily lasts forever. And what I'm doing with Reform UK is I am taking those stances on all of those issues that I think give us the kind of radical change that we need. And I use the word radical in an old-fashioned sense of the word. You see, I'm a traditionalist. I think that our culture matters. I think that our history matters. I think the way that we teach our kids about who we are as a people, as a nation, matters. I think understanding the Judeo-Christian principles that underpin, frankly, all of our civilization, I think that matters. And yet, I believe you can be a traditionalist whilst recognizing that your institutions need to be brought into the 21st century, and that can be done, and one is not inconsistent with the other. So my goal is to reshape the centre-right of British politics into a form that actually stands for the sort of things that you and I would believe in, and becomes electable and wins in 2029. Sometimes in life, things have to get a bit worse before they can get better.
It's safe to say that the UK Conservative Party is at a critical juncture, facing a pressing need for comprehensive reform if it aims to remain relevant and effective in modern British policy. Following a series of political setbacks and a growing public perception of being out of touch with modern societal issues, it's evident that the party must undertake significant changes. There's a substantial demand for the Conservative Party to broaden its appeal among young voters and diverse demographic groups. Recent elections have shown a stark generalization divide, with younger voters increasingly leaning towards more left-leaning parties. A YouGov survey found that, quote, all age groups below 50 voted for Labour, 41 to 46%, adding, quote, the median age of a Labour voter is now 46 and the median age of a Conservative voter is 63. The defeat also came as a result of a series of failures by successive prime ministers over the past years. The party has been seeing a revolving door of leadership, each struggling to maintain stability and public trust, especially after Brexit. The continuous change at the top created a perception of chaos and incompetence, shaking voter confidence. The lack of a stable, consistent leadership led to policy inconsistencies and unfulfilled promises, the most notable which was the catastrophic tenure of Liz Truss, who was ousted just 49 days of becoming prime minister, since her, quote, mini budget caused financial turmoil and the British pound fell to record lows against the US dollar. Rishi Sunak's tenure wasn't that successful as well. The combination of all these factors led to this humiliating loss.
You know, my country, Canada, insofar as it's a good country, has principles that are derived from the UK, and they're very functional. And I read a great book at one point called The Wealth and Poverty of Nations by a guy named Landis, a historian from Harvard, who pointed out that in the Western Hemisphere, if you were a country in the modern world that was settled by France, Portugal, or Spain, you were poor. Whereas if you were a country that was settled by Great Britain with British institutions, you were rich. And that struck me, and still does, as highly probable. And so the radical leftists would say Britain has a dreadful colonial past, that the capitalist enterprise marginalizes the poor and other marginalized groups, obviously, that the time for nationalism is far gone and you have to be something approximating an oppressive fascist to think otherwise. So what case can you make, say, particularly to young people, for that serves as a barrier against the assault and accusations of the oh-so-moral radicals, but that also offers people a compelling invitation moving forward? What does reform have to offer?
Well, we believe in family, community, and country. We believe they're the three building blocks that matter to all of us, whatever age we are. And if you deny those, well, you're entitled to deny those. But it's rather important that through the education system, people don't just hear that argument, they hear the positive argument. And I think what progressivism is doing, it's confusing young people. I mean, young men are being told they can't be men. We've got England through to the quarterfinals of the European Championships as I speak, and they're being told that if you go to Germany, please don't drink too much beer, please don't chant in the stadiums, please don't sing songs that are funny but might cause offence. Please don't be young lads. I mean, that's effectively what we're telling people through this progressive agenda. And we're telling women, now look, what's the problem? You're in a changing room, you're in a locker room, and there's somebody there with male anatomy, but that person calls themselves a woman. So what's your problem?
This brings to mind a Ronald Reagan quote where he stated, quote, "The family's always been the cornerstone of American society. Our families nurture, preserve, and pass on to each succeeding generation the values we share and cherish, values that are the foundation of our freedoms." The progress movement completely rejects such a concept, aiming to impose their globalist agenda. Starting from the smallest unit of the society, which is the family, they aim to diminish it and replace it with broad-based identity groups centered on political affiliations and character markers that are applicable universally. This can be interpreted as weakening the bonds that tie local communities together, replacing them with virtual or ideological communities that span national and international boundaries, which is similar to what the communities used to do. They also focus on weakening the patriotic spirit and undermining national sovereignty in favor of global governance structures like the United Nations or the European nation. For them, international laws and agreements supersede national laws and constitutions. All of these actions have a single end goal in mind, which is paving the way for more centralized top-down governance that could impose universal standards and policies at the expense of local customs, laws, and traditions.
Despite what their school teachers and university lecturers are telling them, I'm seeing great hope among Gen Z for the kind of principles that we believe in. I'm seeing it in France at the moment, where we're heading up for the second round of these French elections, and even though Marine Le Pen's economic policies might be deeply socialist, culturally she believes in La France. And I fully understand why. I see Trump doing amazingly well with young people in America, and suddenly, even though I'm 60, some young people for some reason think I'm cool. So actually, I am seeing great hope. Thank goodness.
Gen Z is increasingly identifying with right-wing ideologies drawn by their emphasis on individual freedom, economic responsibility, and skepticism towards progressive agendas. A recent Gallup study shows that Gen Z teens are twice as likely to identify as more conservative than their parents than millennials were 20 years ago. I think this shifts a reaction to excess in cancel culture, identity politics, and restrictive speech norms associated with the left. Now, I bet your friends on Facebook would have a lot to say to this, so share it with them and let's get the conversation rolling in the comments down below.